All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another Ask Us Anything with the Wolves of All Street. My name is Nexus. I am your host for today. And we have a very interesting project coming forward. The chief of Infomatix, which purports to be a very interesting kind of info sharing platform with a public source kind of data ethos that they're going for. With that said, all of the information that you're going to hear is going to be opinions and information for your personal use only. Nothing is financial advice. It never is around here. And honestly, do your own research at all times. And while I have an audience, I'm just going to add, please do not click shady links in DMs from random users in the server. It is very much appreciated. Users who want to tell you about something will tell you in public. They will not tell you in private. There is no reason for them to tell you in private. Okay. Mr. Fowler, how are you doing this fine afternoon? Or evening, as it is in your zone.
Very, very well. It's actually 6 a.m. here, but that's
oh God,
that's okay. I'm doing super well. We've got some flooding going on here in Australia, so I'm nice and safe inside, ready for the AMA, and loved the disclaimers there. Crypto's the Wild West, so I like it. Make
absolutely.
It nice and if it's coming in the DMs, it's no good for you.
Absolutely. And with all of that said, welcome. I would like to begin, as I always do, by asking you to introduce yourself and anything you'd like the community to know to get to know you.
Okay, what a good place to start, and thank you very much. Glad we could organize this the second time round. First time there was a bit of a time zone issue, so I apologize about that. But glad we were able to sort it out. So my name's Nathan. I'm the CEO of Infomatix. We've built quite an exciting project, and it's been maturing more and more as time has gone on. And basically what we set out to do was to address the gap in the market that was the piece around alternate data. So to help you understand the problem we were trying to solve, what we originally set out to do was to build a data visualization platform that would allow investors to visualize their portfolio across multiple asset classes. So, we're crypto guys, there's the stock people, real estate investors, collectors, all of these types of people. We were trying to find a solution to the portfolio tracking problem. And really the issue was, if you're tracking things like stocks and cryptos, it's no problem really to pull data for those things, and you can get that data from a lot of different places. But if you're invested in anything fringe or illiquid or that has a smaller market cap, or if you're investing in any physical asset, there's no data available really for you. So, coin collectors, Pokemon card guys, Yeezy, Jordans, all these types of things, you have to track by hand and sort of work out your best guess on what your investments were worth. And we didn't like that. We wanted to pull that data from somewhere. And, before we set out to build anything, we were trying to see if there were any existing data providers that we could pull this data from. Was there a way that we could aggregate, the price of collectible books and Pokemon cards and postage stamps with existing sources? And it turned out that really wasn't the case. And so what Infomatix is really the solution to that problem. We solve the data collection and verification piece. And so what that's allowed us to do is to build out data sets that cover all of those alternative and illiquid asset classes by linking experts with that knowledge with the requesters who are looking for it. So Infomatix is the, data repository for everything that's not super digital. So, with crypto and stock, interest rate, bond, currency data providers, they continue doing what they're doing, and then we bring the physical element of that to them. So completing the pitch and bringing it full circle.
Okay, so it's basically, to use an automobile term, the blue book of basically everything obscure, rare, antique, or otherwise arcane in the area of information-based pricing.
Yeah, exactly right. So we've just finished our first iteration of the product, and the community's been using it quite a lot. We've had, thousands of valuations submitted, and what we found is that there is so many weird and wonderful little niche, quirky asset classes that people are super passionate about. And for those people, these are legitimate investments that they're as passionate about as we are about crypto. But the difference between them and us is we have countless financial services that available to us. We can go and reference on-chain data. We've got as many portfolio tracking tools as you could poke a stick at. We can see analyst reports and all these types of things on our investments. But if you have a bit of a passion for collectible 35 millimeter cameras, from before 1980. You might have a $30,000 collection. You've been putting this together your whole life, but there's no way to really value it. There's no way to treat it like a traditional investor would treat a portfolio without something like Infomatix.
Yeah, and normally
so
you'd need the Pawn Stars style expert to come in and look at your stuff, and that probably itself costs money in consultation fees, etc.
Exactly, yes. And so this is the problem we've been setting out to solve. It's actually funny that you mentioned Pawn Stars. We're actually trying to get a couple of those guys on board. So the way Infomatix works, to get into I guess a bit more of the platform itself, is there are lots of data sets that we can pull, that we can use and redistribute. But there's also a lot of really specific one-of-one valuations that come up. And for those valuations, an expert and a verifier will be involved in that valuation process. So let's say you have something really bizarre and quirky, and it does require an expert to value it. You'll put the request in, an expert will value it, someone like the guys from Pawn Stars, and then another equally qualified expert will verify and justify that valuation for you. So the data security piece is really cool in that respect, because we can link it back to individuals. So it's not just, computer says, $100. It's, an art historian, Steve, with these credentials, has valued your piece at X based on, these criteria. So as an investor, it just gives you that level of security and confidence. And for real estate specifically, this is something that we're super excited about. Because typically real estate is valued with algorithms that take into account the suburb, the recent sales, similar property types. It gives you a very general valuation, but it doesn't take into account your individual property. And what we're able to do with Infomatix is, if you request a valuation, a real estate agent is going to take into account the specifics of your asset and give you the right valuation, which, typically for a real estate investor, they only know the valuations really the day they buy and the day they sell their property. And what Infomatix allows you to keep up to date with those, more detailed valuations all the way throughout.
Okay. Is your development team fully doxed? Judging by the site, it certainly appears the whole team's putting it out there, which in this space is not nothing.
Oh yeah, no, our team is fully doxed. We're totally legitimate operators that, we've built quite a few tech products before. This is our first crypto product. So, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. The difference between, working in the traditional space and working in the Web3 space, to put a loose title on it. But yeah, our team is totally out there. Our CTO, Sergey, is actually a doctor of applied mathematics, and he's an absolute genius. He's really the brains behind all of this. We certainly wouldn't be able to do what we've been able to do without Sergey, and then his whole team, of course, is fully public.
A doctor of applied mathematics. Do you mind I ask what university?
A university in the Ukraine, so I'm not
Oh,
100% sure
Lord
which
have mercy.
university. So yeah, we do have quite a few team members in the Ukraine at the moment. All of them are still working. It's a horrific situation. We've been on the phone to them every day. One of our designers has been at the border trying to get out since basically all of this started. The rest are a bit far away from the border to get out, and they're all in a small town in the Ukraine right now, continuing to work, and yeah, hoping for a resolution to what's turned out to be a pretty uncomfortable situation for everybody.
Yes, and while everyone is going to have differing opinions on the specific political nuances of the Ukraine crisis, I'll ask the community politely to avoid any partisan-leaning conversations about that, and speaking for myself, I hope your team gets out of the situation okay.
Yes, we were totally shocked by it, to be honest. I was talking to the team and I was saying, hey guys, we're seeing all this stuff on our news. Looks like you guys are going to kick off into a pretty ugly situation. And the developers basically said, well, look, there's been tension since 2014, but there's nothing new. We don't think it's going to get out of control. And then obviously 2 days later, I got a call from our designer who lived right in the initial conflict zone.
Yeah.
Basically called me and he said, look, Russia's invaded. There's bombs going off. I need to get out of here. And yeah, poor guy's been stuck on the border ever since then in kind of his car. They're just trying to process everybody. So yeah, we're praying for a very quick resolution here, at least. Something that's going to be a little bit more stable than it is now.
Absolutely. Well, stepping aside from the heavy geopolitics, we'll get to now to the matter at hand. Let's dive into how Infomatix works, starting with Gnosis. Is Gnosis a separate project from Infomatix?
No. So Gnosis and Infomatix work together. I'm glad you mentioned it. So Gnosis is the best way to think about it, the front of house. That's what users interface with, and that's what's going to be most relevant for people who aren't, specifically invested in the project. Infomatix does all the heavy lifting on the back end, but what the user sees is Gnosis. So Gnosis is that data visualization tool that we were talking about right at the beginning. Allows investors to visualize their portfolio across multiple asset classes. So I come to Gnosis, I put my real estate in, I put my stocks, my cryptos, and maybe my cash balance, or my debt, if I have any debt. And that'll give me sort of a live updated P&L. But on top of that, I have quite an extensive book collection. I have a couple of bits of artwork. I have some collectible sneakers. And I have a few other physical assets that have some, significant value to them that aren't digital assets that I can track along with everything else.
Yeah, so they might be sentimental, they might be historical. There's a number of avenues that can add value to an asset for a number of reasons.
Exactly, yeah. And what I didn't realize the gravity of when we set out to build this that I've now seen sort of quite a few times is how passionate some of these niche communities are. There's a whole group of people that are specifically collecting, antique eyeglasses from a particular brand in the 1960s that just were doing something different that now are super valuable, and people spend their whole lives, going through, charity stores and secondhand stores looking for these eyeglasses. It's like a way of life for these people. But because there's not enough of them to justify sort of, a Bloomberg terminal or a specific price, aggregator just for their asset class, nobody really serves them. There's no financial products that help their passion and their niche. And that's, it goes on forever. There are, antique armchair collectors, people who try to get every edition of Time magazine there's ever been. That we're not sort of here to sort of point out which specific asset it needs to be. It's just to create a framework.
At that point.
Exactly. Yes. And so the fact the user can request the valuation allows us to sort of service everybody, because if we don't have it, we'll have it for you really quickly. And sorry, I lost my train. I was making another point just before that. Where were we at just before that?
Oh, I'm sorry. We were talking about essentially how Gnosis supplies this visualization and yeah.
Yes. So Gnosis has quite a few data feeds that we buy for everything we mentioned earlier: currencies, interest rates, bonds, stocks, cryptos, all of these types of things. And then everything that doesn't fall into that framework, it goes into the bucket of Infomatix. And then that's the back end data collection piece. So what the users don't see is information requests in the back end going into Infomatix, being fed through to either a database that we have access to, or being given to an expert who's qualified to value these asset classes. And so what we have is a group of the mix between sort of online researchers and really heavy duty subject matter experts, art historians, real estate agents, watchmakers, things like this that can value specific categories of assets. So for example, the watchmaker won't be able to value your real estate, and the real estate agent won't be able to value your Persian rug. But we have pretty much someone for everything right now. And that allows us to sort of open up the floodgate to say, anything you want valued, throw it in the Infomatix portal and we'll find the valuation for you. Because we have those resources we can lean on who are able to provide those hard to get valuations.
And different experts from different places with different fiat currencies and different bases for value will often see the same item as being worth a range, essentially. You'll have to take an average or do a number of different things to try to get something in the ballpark. Does the Gnosis Infomatix system have something for competing data points, basically?
Yeah. We're getting into the nitty gritty now, which I quite like. So the way the Infomatix portal works is there can be one asset may have many possible valuations, and so that's where the expert comes in and determines either if there's one valuation that's more correct or if it's an average that needs to be taken. And then that's sort of the first line of decision making. The second line is the verification. So every valuation that comes through is going to be verified as well. And the verification process will critique the judgment that the first actor made and determine whether it's correct. So what we find is having two experts come to the same conclusion gives us the highest degree of confidence in our valuations. But again, there's always a very small margin of error that can't be sort of worked out, but we're getting as accurate valuations as possible, I would say. And so for some asset classes, it's ultra accurate, like real estate, for example. For some asset classes, it's as accurate as it can be. So things like rare books, for example, where you might not have much of a history to compare a specific item to, and you have to compare it to a category or a basket of similar sales. It's a bit more, there's a little bit more abstraction, I would say. So depending on your asset class, will depend on the level of confidence we can have in the actual valuation.
That leads nicely into my next question. What's the difference between a, quote, data supplier and a, quote, data verifier? Can they be the same person? And if they can, isn't that a conflict of interest?
Well, so there's a couple of different elements. So let's take sneakers, for example. For sneakers, we don't need an expert to value each individual pair of sneakers. If we're assuming that it's in a predefined condition, we can reference a database. So if you have a pair of 2016 Yeezys and they are still in their box, we can find out that value for you without going to the expert. So in that case, we're pulling from a database. Where the experts come in is, let's say, for example, I have a Persian rug, for example. Someone who's well-versed in Persian rugs would need to provide a valuation for that. And so they'll receive a request. The request will say, hey, I have this rug. It has these characteristics. Here's a picture of it. What do you think it's worth? The expert will value it based on the information given to them. The verifier will verify that the expert's valuation is correct and useful. And then the verifier and the expert will be paid a small bounty in info tokens for their work. And then the user gets that data point back. And now the user can visualize that asset along with all their other assets in their portfolio in Gnosis.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't think it would work like that. Okay, cool.
We spent a long time trying to figure out the best way to solve this. And again, really hats off to our CTO Sergey, who's spent a lot of time, late nights, thinking through some of these things. And the approach we've come up with, and anyone who's a bit more nerdy with their data can jump into our white paper and have a look at the nuts and bolts of how we've put it all together. But what we've come up with is a really cool hybrid approach that leans on databases on one side and expertise on the other side, and together has been able to put together a mechanism that's capable of pricing basically anything, which may seem like something that's relatively trivial, but at the moment it's a huge gap in the market, and all of these tiny little niche groups together form a massive cohort of investors. So for us, it's really best case scenario, because we're giving people access to something they've never had before. The overwhelming feedback when we bring this to people is, this is exactly what we've been looking for. We can't believe there was nothing like this before now. And the other piece is that this is the first time most of these investors are hearing about crypto. So, if you're an antique 35mm film camera collector, and that's your, passion, you may not have been paying too much attention to the crypto market, but now Infomatix is providing sort of real value to you, and this will be, in a lot of cases, investors' first exposure to crypto, which we're quite grateful for, because competing for attention within the crypto market is very difficult, very loud, very noisy, and very expensive.
Yes.
But competing for the attention of postage stamp collectors is a very different story. If we're just looking, if we're just looking at cost per ads to get a click through to your website in the crypto space, I think the going rate is about $10. To get a click through from an ad that's targeted at postage stamp collectors, it's less than 20 cents. So from a business perspective, these niche groups, especially if we curate them and pick them well, allow us to leverage sort of a much larger group of people for a similar marketing effort, which is something we're quite excited about, that doesn't really happen with many crypto projects, because for most of the crypto projects, the only market is crypto investors. So we think that's going to be quite a big avenue for us.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just on the marketing piece as well, it's something that may end up coming up during the call. When we launched the project, I mentioned that we had experience building quite a few other tech products in the past. Those have all kind of relied on the product itself and a sales team rather than marketing. And so this project, Infomatix, was really our first project that relied heavily on marketing. And we went through, from the beginning of our project, 3 marketing people who just had no idea what was going on with crypto. We tried one guy that came from e-commerce. We brought on someone who was supposed to be a heavy hitter who had run political campaigns before and managed massive budgets for Canadian politicians. He was hopeless as well. Wow. It took us until recently, until about 6 weeks ago, to find Orkan, who's now our CMO, who's an absolute wizard. So at the beginning of the project, the long and short of it was, there was little to no marketing that was making any difference going on at all, and that definitely had I guess, an impact on the project because new people weren't finding out about it.
Naturally, yeah.
But now, well, yes, but recently we've found Orca about 6 weeks ago, and that's made all the difference to the project, because now we're able to know how much it costs to market to postage stamp collectors, for example. And this is really the big missing piece that was not present at launch, which definitely should have been.
Okay. Now we're going to get into the real weeds here. I've got 2 fat questions before I kick it to the community.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Infomatix is described as, quote, a data collection tool that aims to build the world's most comprehensive financial database through crowdsourced expertise, end quote. This is going to seem a little ironic, given that a lot of us love our single public ledgers, but a lot of crypto folks are very much against big data sweeps and companies taking over data processing. You won't find a lot of love for Mark Zuckerberg in this universe. My concern is, how can Infomatix and Gnosis too, I guess, ensure that there's going to be info security for the doxed individuals who are going to be supplying expertise? It sounds to me like one good data hack could get a lot of very prominent people's information about who they are, what they know, why they know it, and where they are.
Fantastic question. I think one of the best things that ever happened to us as a project is on our first day of listing. So we've been building in the background, we've been putting this project together, we've been trying to dot all our T's and cross all our I's and get everything spick and span ready for launch. We went through our pre-sale, went through our IDO, and the IDO is finished, sold out very, very quickly. Everyone's euphoric, and bam, we list. Within minutes of listing, we had our site taken down. A hacker basically messaged us and said, "Hey guys, I've taken your site down. I found a vulnerability. You need to pay me to put your site back online." We have very, very experienced development team that basically said, "We've never seen anything like this." Crypto obviously attracts the best and brightest of the hacker community, which speaks to your point at the beginning about not answering things from the DMs. And we basically were hit by something we hadn't expected. The reason I say it's the best thing is because it happened on day one, and it totally hardened us up to that type of thing. We went all out. So what I would say is there's always the question of sort of data integrity. What we've done is we've secured our systems to sort of comparable levels of a bank and a financial institution. So we've got as comprehensive a security set up as humanly possible. On top of that, everything's encrypted on the back end. So if, God forbid, there ever was a data leak, they would receive information that would be unintelligible. Because of its encryption, there's no way they would ever be able to determine a name or the actual specifics of the information. So there's a lot of levels of security to that, but everything's audited, everything's checked off by cybersecurity and DevOps. Everything's tested. We're bringing out a more comprehensive bug bounty shortly when the next iteration of the product is released, but always, and this is, I guess, a healthy fear of ours, always user data is the number one most important thing, and we absolutely can't afford any issues, and for that reason we spend a lot on this particular piece. We have a lot of very clever people watching it, and it's constantly being tested. So after our first day of sort of realizing, geez, this crypto industry is really the wild west.
It really is.
We've had no issues. There's certainly been a lot of attempts. We can see from our side when someone's trying to do something silly. But since we hired our DevOps head Anton to lead all this, and since he put all his systems and processes in place, no one's been able to get past really the front door. which, touch wood, we will absolutely continue. But I think what we learned from that is our team have built quite substantial products before and never had to need that type of security. And I think the great thing about crypto is because it's so competitive and because there's so much skullduggery going on, it forces the projects to strengthen and level up sort of much more than, anyone else would need to do. Like, good housekeeping has millions of traffic, millions of user traffic every day. But they don't need, massive cybersecurity because their customers are middle-aged housewives who are not really hacker threat. Our customers and the people who are interested in us are the most technically capable and the most advanced sort of tech savvy community out there. So we need to play at a much, much higher level. And that's what we've been doing since day two. Day one when we launched the site, we had the type of cybersecurity you would need for a normal business enterprise piece of software. What we have now, as I said earlier, is much more on the level of what you would see at a bank or a larger crypto exchange. And so for that reason, yes, yeah. And so for that reason, we are always worried about, a breach, but where, at least we know now we've done everything we could possibly do. And it's if someone's going to try and get in, they're going to have to try very, very hard. And I still don't think there'd be any way for them through.
All right. That's awesome. I'm very glad to hear that, because these folks who are going to supply you guys with the data are certainly not going to want to be called by everyone on the internet.
Yes.
No,
not another Ashley, not another Ashley Madison. No, I think look, the encryption is really our secret sauce there. So there's obviously never going to be another breach, but if there was, the data that they would receive would be gibberish. It wouldn't make any sense. It would be a string of it would be like a string of hashtags and zeros and dollar signs. It wouldn't make any sense. There's nothing that anyone would be able to do with it.
All right, and for my final deep cut question, you're going to need to bear with me because this kind of requires a premise to set up. I'm one of those. Oh yeah. No, I don't always have a premise-based question, but your project is interesting and it conjured a scenario to me based on recent events in the gaming world. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people who loves learning, and there are a lot of autodidactic, meaning self-taught learners out there. Mm-hmm. Would these individuals be given the same kind of gravitas or authority over subject or asset pricing as verifiable or doxed dealers or experts in their field? And if they are equal by virtue of being equal participants in the data economy, then how is the expertise of individual quote-unquote experts to be fairly graded? I ask this in a particular context. Recently, there was a retro video gaming pricing controversy that erupted from price-fixing activity between an auction house and a retro game grade merchandiser. It turned out the same people owned equity in both organizations, and that created an insane conflict of interest that enabled them to turn Super Nintendo games from the mid-90s into their own Dutch tulip bubble, complete with multi-million-dollar auctions for copies of Super Mario Brothers. Basically, the guys running the auction and the guys determining and grading the value of assets turned out to be the same guy. And I have other examples I could give you, but that's the example that I have. The IRL art world example I would say is the Louvre. Say, would the Louvre be capable of dominating and deciding, grading the prices and values of most major pieces of art? Or would other, perhaps smaller art dealers or houses have a fair chance to supply their differing and separate metrics for grading artwork, differing from whatever the Louvre would want to price it at?
Oh, what a good question. I'm going to answer it. There's a couple of components to it. So
Yes.
if I stray away from the core of it, bring me back to it, please.
Okay.
'Cause
Gotcha.
I am liable to get to take
Well,
off down the
I'm
rabbit
willing to
hole.
let you run off and run with this a little bit because this is a very hard question and you have a complex
Yes,
project
yes.
and it calls for a question like this. So
No,
run with it, Fowler.
it's one we've thought about quite a lot. It's not one anyone's asked us about before, so I'm very happy about that. So there are certain categories for valuation that will absolutely require a qualification. I think the one that springs to mind, and one of the most popular use cases for our product, is real estate. So if you're a real estate agent and your license is in the United States, you won't be able to value properties in Australia because it's a different market, and you're simply not qualified for that. So in order to value real estate, you would have to be an agent in that local area. In that scenario, it would be possible for a group of agents to try and skew prices, but extremely difficult because once a sale goes through, it's all public. So, and I don't think there'd be any incentive there. With other areas, let's use the collectible books for example. There are people who are totally qualified to provide evaluations that don't really have any qualification that you can reference. The only way you can determine their expertise is with a test or a quiz or something like that. In that scenario, let's say you have a qualified book restorer with university degrees and connections with art houses and things like that, and someone who's not qualified. In these scenarios, there's no particular weighting given. What can happen is several requests can be responded to by the expert. So let's say 3 separate experts provide 3 separate valuations for a specific asset. The onus is then on the verifier, which is the final step for us to make the final decision. So if there are 3 valuations and they're all exactly the same, the verifier will go with the person who's most qualified, so that we can attach that name to the valuation. If they're wildly different, then it's the task of the verifier to find out why they're wildly different and which one's most relevant. The scenario you gave is fascinating. I hadn't heard that before. I'm going to look into it more later on, but I don't think there's really scope for that because our data feeds and the data that the Infomatix platform collects is a hybrid of user-generated data, data that comes from the experts, and data that we're pulling from databases. So, for example, we can pull databases of let's say items that were sold by a pawnbroking conglomerate in the United Kingdom that has sort of 95 stores, and they track every item they sell. They might have 40 competing data points for each valuation that's provided by an expert. And in that scenario, if the expert and the existing data are sort of diverging, then it's up to the verifier. So at the end of the day, there is definitely some human error possible in the system, but it's not open to that type of arbitrage that's really a closed loop. Like, for example, if there was someone trying to corner the market of collectible Buddhist gongs, for example, they wouldn't be able to sign up as the only gong valuer and drive up all the values on our platform, because there's always going to be the option for other people to offer their opinion and their valuations and their thoughts. So it does make it more difficult to do what you were describing, but it's not I can't say it's an impossibility, but it's definitely much more difficult
Yes,
than
and for
sort of
context,
2 people having both halves.
Oh yeah, and for context, I should add that in this particular Nintendo price fixing situation that recently occurred, this was essentially a combination grading auction monopoly that these handful of individuals essentially had so much equity in both the gaming auction and the game merchandise grading house that it enabled them to fix the prices and then sell at the inflated price.
Yes, yes, and that's kind of an amazing case study for us to sort of look at and make sure our systems are vulnerable to these types of, I guess, arbitrage opportunities, you'd call it. But no, I don't think that's something we're liable to get sucked into. I think the key point that really allows Infomatix data integrity to stand sort of head and shoulders above some of the competition is the verification piece. Because typically what will happen is there will be a data point, and that's the data point, and we have to run with that data point. Having the extra level of, I guess, agreement on top of that is really, from our perspective, like the difference between, keeping a ledger of your expenses and double entry accounting. The ledger of expenses may have 99% accuracy, but that 1% of inaccuracy you'll never be able to find. And it's only when you do the double entry accounting and have that second set of eyes go over it that you're able to find those smaller quirks that might have been missed. So we certainly aren't perfect, but the second set of eyes that go over everything really protect us against most skullduggery, I guess.
Well, no, that's the way you do it. You kind of spread out these responsibilities to make sure that they are decentralized.
Decentralized, and that's exactly, and you mentioned something before about big data and Mark Zuckerberg and these types of things. And I think a big part of what motivates our project is just, we're sick of sort of being, manipulated and siloed and funneled into, particular rabbit holes. And I think we have a bit more of a libertarian bent to us. And we just want to see, data in the hands of the people. I think one of the big frustrations we had when we started this project is Bloomberg offers a service to very, very large investors that the retail investors don't have access to. We can't see the cards that are in the hands of our opponents, whereas the opponents can see our hand and they know exactly what's going on. The GameStop thing was a great illustration of that to retail investors. And so what we're setting out to do with Infomatix is to offer similar services to investors, and that starts out with alternate pricing data. But on our roadmap, we have some longer term plans for Infomatix that will essentially be able to bring sort of 80% of the functionality of the Bloomberg terminal to retail investors for 20% of the cost. And that's really the key point that we're trying to bring. So as a bit of backstory for me, in 2019 and 2020, I was very, very into my investing, having some great success. It was becoming kind of the main focus of my life, and things had started to work well for me. It was kind of this amazing period where it's like I'd been investing for a while, and now my investing was working, and I was getting more and more involved in the markets and different asset classes and trying to figure out where the opportunities were. And I hired a researcher, and I still work with this researcher. His name's Paras, and he helps me analyze companies and research the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of what's going on so that we can make a better investment decision. And I think what we're trying to do with Gnosis and Infomatix is basically provide that as a service to investors. If we had Bloomberg terminals and we were only invested in stocks and real estate, stocks and bonds, then we'd all be fine. But we're not all interested in stocks and bonds, and we don't all have $25,000 a year for a Bloomberg terminal. And so what we're doing is trying to sit in the middle of that and level the playing field to give retail investors the tools that the institutions have access to for a cost that's not prohibitive. And so I don't know if you've had a look at our roadmap, but pricing data is our immediate focus, and that's the product release that we have now. We are the sort of leaders in alternate pricing data. But what we will be adding on to that is due diligence reports. So through Infomatix, you can request more comprehensive research that will be done for you by an expert in the space. And then following that, we'll be bringing on non-financial data as well. We're building some very cool databases around that now. So rainfall data, demographic data, wheat prices in Mozambique, things like that. So that if I'm an investor and I'm trading corn futures, I can run a report on corn price versus rainfall data, and then look at the current rainfall data to make an investment decision. And things like this, use cases like that, there's a massive need for it, but there's no outlet for it. But if I was a Bloomberg customer, for example, I would be able to map all of those things onto a single sort of dashboard and see it straight away. Whereas for a retail investor, that's a 6-month project with all sorts of experts needed to pull it off. And that really, really frustrated us. Like, I know for me personally, when I realized that there were tools out there that I needed that I just couldn't get access to, it kind of like snapped something in my mind. And then that's what really led to the creation of Gnosis and Infomatix to solve that problem. Infomatix takes the data and puts it in the hands of the people, and Gnosis allows everyone to understand their finances in a much more straightforward way. And retail has been sort of left out in the cold. We just weren't happy with that at all.
All right. With that, we're going to kick it to the community. First question from the community. Gilong Desu asks, a project that wants to develop, maintain, and go a long way needs to get a stable revenue stream. How does Infomatix plan to generate profit and revenue for the project, and how will Infomatix allocate revenue to bring profit to both the project and its investors and holders?
Okay, fantastic. So the business model is very, very straightforward. We are collecting a massive amount of data. The alternate pricing data is the main focus now, but very shortly will be a very comprehensive data hub. So whether it's alternative assets, traditional assets, real estate, automobiles, stocks, bonds, art, whatever you like, we'll have data for everything, and we'll sell that data. The thing that will make us unique in that scenario is we will have everything under one roof. Whereas at the moment, it's one company for stock data, one company for crypto data, and there's nobody for alternate asset data. What will also make us very different is we'll have that non-financial data as well that I was talking to you about. So that puts us in a position where we're essentially the sort of source of truth for global data, financial and non-financial. And we'll sell data feeds. So there's quite a few different avenues for that. Part of it is selling to investors who want to make better investment decisions. Another part of that is very underrated is selling that data to people who are doing training AI models and machine learning models. In order to train those models, you need a tremendous amount of data, the type of data that we've been collecting. Moving that data and using it to train models can be very expensive, especially if you need to get it onto a cloud server. So we'll be selling the data directly as feeds. We'll be selling it to people who want to train models. We'll also be selling it to money managers, hedge funds, newsletter writers, people like this who probably aren't quite big enough to need a Bloomberg terminal, but do need access to that specialty data. So that will be the revenue model, the business model on how we'll sustain the project. Just on top of that, there'll also be the due diligence reports. So if you want a really in-depth report on the company that looks at previous legal disputes of the business, track record of the leadership team, financials over a long period of time that are drilled down into by sort of expert accountants, that'll be an additional feature that you can sort of buy through Infomatix that will help the revenue. But to the investor piece, how do the investors benefit? As much as possible, we will sell this data in info terms. So especially if we're arranging large data sets, that are going to be used by people ongoing. We can charge sort of microtransactions for interacting in info tokens, which will drive the price of info for the holders. Information that's paid for in fiat as much as possible will be filtered back into info as sort of a buyback. And then coming to the metaverse piece, which we haven't really spoken about too much on the call here.
Yes, that's the user's next question, actually.
Yes, all of that will be powered by the info token. So there's the utility component to the token that comes into play there, but also anything that you want to do in that space will be denominated in info. So the business model is very sound. The investor piece really relies on that sort of charging and holding the info. So instead of charging in dollars, we would charge a discount rate for info, and we would hold that and not release it back to the market. So for the holders, that's really where the benefit is.
Okay. Yeah. The second question from the same user is Metaverse / Infomatix basically is a hot topic, and they are aware that news will be released this month. Can anyone, everyone in the public, access the Infoverse for free? Can we make a profit there, like buying and selling physical assets?
Yes. So there's a couple of answers to that question. So on the buying and selling a physical asset, there's very much, from our perspective, a mad rush to build what we're currently building so that we can then add on the marketplace feature. So if you've got a collectible antique book, you can add it to your portfolio. You can also sell it, or you could buy additional ones. And for that piece of the puzzle, we'll be aggregating a lot of existing sellers, so we won't necessarily sell it ourselves. So we'll work with StockX for sneakers, eBay for the sort of random bits and bobs. We've got a Pokemon card partner a collectible card partner that does Pokemon cards, baseball cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, things like that. So we've got key partners, and then we'll have eBay for everything else. And sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Can everyone access the Infoverse for free? Like, does it cost info tokens to get there or something?
Not at all. So for the very first iteration, which is what we'll be announcing this week, we'll be inviting sort of 50 people in first to just have a play around and give us their thoughts, and then we'll open it up to everybody. So whether you have a VR headset or not, there'll be a URL you can follow. If you've got the VR headset, you can totally immerse yourself in the space, and it's phenomenal. Like, I've never seen anything like it myself, to be honest. But otherwise, you can just visit it through the web browser and sort of experience it that way.
Okay. Next question from Blur Rev. Thank you for taking the time to do this AMA with our wonderful community. My first question, your website mentions that the people who supply data that goes onto the Infomatix ecosystem must prove their expertise in the field. Who is in charge of the process of vetting these people, and how would that scale to the massive amounts of worldwide data being brought into the ecosystem?
Great question. So at the moment, we have more hands-on admins that are screening these requests. That becomes more and more automated as we grow. Basically, there are some categories that don't require specific credentials, to perform some tasks. Basically, it's a game of online research, and so we have a couple of tests in place that I guess vet the candidate's ability to do that. And then there's other questions, other fields that require more specific expertise before you can go in. So if you're looking to participate and you want to earn money off your online research skills or off your expertise, you can go and apply. Depending on the categories that you want to be able to verify, we'll have different tests and different criteria to let you in. But a part of what we're doing to scale it is relying on LinkedIn qualifications. as a simple first test, and then it gets a bit more of a detailed scrutiny before they go to become verifiers. So what happens is any user can apply to become an appraiser, and that's someone who gives the valuations. The valuations are then verified, and to become a verifier, the vetting process is much more comprehensive. And there's definitely going to be a person involved there who's making sure that you have the credentials and the track record to be able to fill that role.
I was going to say, because LinkedIn I don't think is enough. We've had projects visit us here who've admitted they hired off of LinkedIn, and the people turned out to be fake humans with black hats underneath.
Yes, and so it's a very tricky tricky piece. So what we have is we request university qualifications or a qualification. LinkedIn's one data point, but then we get sort of 6 or 7 other data points. So work history, reference, qualification, things like that. And what we're doing as a sort of way to make things as smooth as possible is treating LinkedIn as sort of the minimum requirement, and then it's the additional checks that happen after that. So there's still definitely work to be done in that. It's a piece we're fully aware of, but at this stage we have total one-on-one vetting that happens, and we can make sure that everything checks out. As we scale, we will have to have slightly less of that for the first iteration. And so that we'll have to rely on things like LinkedIn and qualifications, a certificate of degree or something like that. But yeah, as we grow, we'll have to find a more a less gameable solution. We're aware of that. We just don't have the solution yet.
Gotcha. Blur Rev also asks, you say that those who supply data must be vetted and have a track record for providing good data. Does that mean that these people providing data will be KYC'd or fully doxed in order to confirm that they're actually experts?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you'll see is, let's say, for example, you have an antique armchair, that your grandparents left to you that's, significant to you for whatever reason. If you submit that as an asset on the platform, when you get your valuation back, it will say your asset has been valued at X by John Smith of Seattle, PhD, or something like that. And you'll be able to view the verifier's profile, and you'll be able to see all the valuations they've done, and all of their sort of track record.
Their provenance.
We have. Sorry, what was that?
Their provenance.
Their provenance. You've given me a new word today. Their provenance. You're gonna have to give me a quick little summary of it.
Oh, an asset or a person's provenance is essentially their jacket of achievements, and if in terms of an asset, right, on Pawn Stars, that's what those guys will look into. They'll be like, what's the provenance for this item? You're coming in and telling me it belonged to Elvis Presley, but what proof do you have? Do you have some kind of proof of sale from the Presley estate? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so we'll have that. So let's say, for example, if I was a verifier, a user can follow a valuation that I've done to see all of my valuations, my profile, and my credentials. So it doesn't solve all the problems, but it does open up the actual individual to be scrutinized. And I think that ability to scrutinize the individual is really key for us, because you can fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, you can't fool me twice.
That brings me to the final part of his question, which I held off because I wanted to hear your answer on that. What is the penalty for providing bad data?
So the penalty for providing bad data, if you do it once, you lose some of your rating. You'll be de-ranked with regards to the future requests you'll be able to do. So if there's a new request in future, you won't be shown as quickly as people with better ratings. And we understand, there can be a small margin of error. So if you do it once, your valuation will be expunged. We'll get a new valuation for that same asset, and you'll have a slight handicap on your ability to perform future valuations. If you make if you provide an incorrect valuation 3 times, you're gone, kind of thing. So we'll tolerate 1 mistake, 2 mistakes, gets you quite significantly deranked, but you're still able to be a part of the platform. And the 3rd time is, goodbye, we'll find somebody else who's more reliable. We haven't, there's always going to be that. We weren't able to put a system together that had no error. But we have been able to put a system together that doesn't encourage error making at all. It weeds people out pretty quickly. And so what we find is with people valuing data from this asset, from this platform, we get a couple of different types. Some people who are very serious and passionate about their space, and do this kind of in their spare time, almost as like a side job. And then another type that we get apply that very, very rarely make it, long on the platform, but always people from sort of developing nations that want to jump on and just throw random bits of information out. And those guys get weeded out very, very quickly. And so what happens is over time, you end up with a higher and higher quality to the sort of corpus of contributors. And that then becomes the resilience. So, if you've got 12 responses to a specific request and 11 of them are from qualified experts and 1 of them is from someone who's just throwing out random thoughts, it stands out. It's quite stark on the platform, very obvious to the verifiers.
Okay. Master Halo 40 asks, I was investigating that soon Infomatix's multiverse is going to launch. Can you explain to us more in detail about the launch of the metaverse, how we can access it, and what things that it's possible to do there?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't want to drop too much alpha here because we're in the wrong channel, but maybe I will. Let me just bring up a quick link. My community hasn't actually seen this.
Oh, we might get something exclusive, you guys.
We are going to get something exclusive. So let me just drop this in the chat here. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Okay. Cool. So it's going to take a minute. So maybe not to watch now while we're all here, but definitely jump on this. This is a video that takes you through the Infomatix metaverse. So basically, Gnosis allows you to visualize your portfolio across multiple asset classes, which is a really cool feature. A lot of people love it. It's just really nice as an investor who's got a few different eggs in a few different baskets to be able to see everything in one place. And all of that is powered by the info token. What's happened is we've sort of coagulated those 2 elements on a higher level in the form of the metaverse. And so basically what you're able to do in the metaverse is totally immerse yourself in the research process, in the portfolio analysis and stock picking process. And one thing that, I think I had no idea of until I started to do this is how much easier and more clearly you're able to think when you can spatially lay everything out. So what the metaverse is a portfolio analysis and research tool that you can totally immerse yourself in. But you can have giant structures of connected points that maybe relate all to one asset. You're able to research and think and curate information without any limitations. And so for me, I have a mess of notebooks with random thoughts, that relate to all the different things that I'm working on. What you're able to do in the metaverse is link everything together. So if you find an article that you like about a stock you're invested in, you can bring that into the metaverse and link it to the actual asset that you've got. You can bring all of your points of interest into one sort of little room almost. And when you're trying to do your research and your analysis, you can go and you can totally immerse yourself in what you're doing in ways that it's totally impossible to do now. And I think if you haven't used the VR gear yet, or enter the metaverse is just going to blow you away when you see what's possible. Like I had no idea. Like this has been one of the most amazing things ever for me, because it's a case of there's a lot of things that are totally intuitive for us that we intuitively want to do, but we had no outlet of doing before. And the metaverse allows you to do those things that you kind of intuitively were leaning towards before, but didn't really have, you know, the outlet.
Okay. We are well over an hour, but I am barely getting started with community questions. Are you good to keep going for a while?
Yes, yes. I don't have anything for the next hour and a half, so I'm good. And just as well, now we're getting into the community questions. What a cracking channel and community you've got here. We are quite friendly with Depot. We've got a bit of a good relationship where we kind of, you know, exchange ideas and thoughts and do a bit of brainstorming together. And after they did their AMA with you, they called me up straight away and they said, Nathan, we finally found like a great interview. You need to book in with Wolves of Wall Street. So credit to you, my friend. Great interview.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I put my all into it, and the community is no slouch themselves, and I couldn't do this alone. My team and my community are absolutely my bedrock.
Well, it definitely shows. I mean, normally when we get on these AMAs, you get a list of questions same questions for every project, and you know that there's no follow up or anything like that. So I've had a lot of fun today. It's the most in depth I think we've really gone into the project. I'm glad we were able to do it with the community here.
Oh yeah, and we're not done. There is more digging to do, friends. Next question from Master Halo 40. I would also like to know why you guys decided to use the BSC network as the basis of the info token, and what unique benefits does this decision bring to the holders?
Great question. So before we launched, we went through just an absolutely painful analysis process of trying to determine which chain we should be on. Should we build our own chain? Should we use Ethereum? Should we use BSC? Solana was getting started around then. There was a huge amount of options. And essentially, what we ended up coming down to was that this token itself has a utility component to it, but it also needs to be transacted relatively frequently, especially if we're using it to send and receive payments amongst the ecosystem. So for that reason, we became very averse to transaction fees. You know, if we've got to pay a small fee, let's say, for example, we've got to pay $12 to somebody, we don't want to pay $24 in transaction fees. It will make the business unsustainable. And so for that reason, transaction fees became our kind of main focus. And that's what led us to BSC. Having said that, there is potential scope in the future to evolve that for a couple of different reasons. I don't know, with the benefit of hindsight, whether BSC was in fact the best network, but it solves all of our problems in the easiest, most simple way. So I guess at the end of the day, there's so many different options and so many different pros and cons to each option. But what it really came down to for us was the fees, and when we were looking at the actual mechanics, so to speak, BSC and Ethereum were effectively one and the same from a technical perspective, and so it was the transactions that brought us over to BSC rather than ETH.
Gotcha. Okay, Tolotli asks, there are great data oracle-based projects, or focus projects rather, in the ecosystem, along with price feed oracle ones. Has Infomatix or Gnosis made any contribution or collaboration with them? Or are you simply creating a totally new way to run in this regard?
Well, we're absolutely creating something totally new. So what the oracles do and the price feeds is quite different to what we're trying to do. So with the price feeds, specifically. We buy our price feeds from traditional data wholesalers. We could buy them from someone who stores that data on chain, but as far as the actual product and use case is concerned, it wouldn't make much of a difference. And there are some simplicity. There's some additional simplicity to doing it off chain for stock data, for example. The oracles, that's something quite different. When we're not really trying to tackle that space. However, on Saturday morning, a few days from now, I do have a call with Chainlink. The reason we're talking with them is because we've amassed a huge amount of data for physical and alternative assets. We've also amassed quite a substantial amount of data for historical pricing. So if you go to Google and try and look at the S&P 500 chart, it'll only show you from 2000 to now. We've got data that goes back, 100 years, 150 years, in gold's case, 500 years. And so we're talking to Chainlink about the potential of bringing that data on chain, which would be great for them, be great for us. It will be very simple for us to do with Chainlink, but there's also a potential, and it's much more labor intensive from our side, where we do that ourselves. And so either way, the data that we have will end up on chain. Whether we do it through an in-house solution or through a partnership hasn't been decided yet. But yeah, I think that's a convoluted answer to your question, but that's what we're working on at the moment. How to best solve that problem.
Okay. So Lotley's second question. When I try to apply for early access, I see very interesting sectors like jewelry, antiques on the list. What is your criteria for selecting the categories of items that go in the list?
We really here have to take our hats off to the community. We have what we think is a good foundation of categories, and that's books, antiques, cards, collectibles, jewelry, whatever it may be. But we've added quite a few to that list based on user feedback. So, for example, one thing we found, which I had anticipated, is when we started collecting data and allowing users to request valuations, there was a huge amount of stuff around video games. And I'm not particularly that much of a game myself, so it hadn't occurred to me. But as soon as we realized that was important to our users, then we added on as an additional category. There are also a lot of other things that people upload that may end up becoming categories if they become popular enough. So, for example, people uploading their perfumes and their aftershave and things like this. And so, if we find that there are trends with specific asset classes, we'll just go ahead and add them.
Well, and there's your Chainlink connection right there. I mean, retail products. That's something that Chainlink's all about, is tracking logistics and retail stuff. So.
Yes, and so the call on Saturday will be a very good call. I think it's going to turn out awesome. Then what we need to decide is whether we want to let Chainlink do that, and be a quick, easy process, and it'll be over very, very quickly, or if we feel like it's going to be worthwhile for us to do it ourselves, in which case it'll be more work. It'll take a little bit longer, but it will be all in house. So doing it with Chainlink gives us a lot of clout now, and it makes it much easier now. Long term, though, we just need to decide whether that's the best for the best approach for the project itself.
Okay. Our next question comes from Sunset, who asks, are token holders going to be receiving holder rewards of some kind?
It's not what we've built the project for. So there's no fees on any of the transactions, which was our, I guess, primary focus when we were picking chains and setting all this up. And without having fees, it's difficult to add the token rewards in. I think what the holders can expect as far as rewards goes is lots of buyback through fiat payments that are made on the Infomatix platform, and holding of the info tokens that are paid to the info platform, so that it will, I guess, decrease the amount of tokens that are on the market. profit sharing mechanisms, things that we've thought about in the past, but we've avoided just because we don't necessarily want this to be a quick flash in the plan, one cycle project that, you know, is here to make a quick buck and gone tomorrow. And if that's what we wanted to do, we definitely have sort of that profit sharing mechanism and a fee built in and all these types of things. But because we want to become the central source of sort of data for financial and non-financial feeds, we need to make sure that it's sustainable and scalable. And if there's fees involved and profit sharing, it makes some of the other components of what we want to do much more difficult. So we've decided to steer away from that consciously, which I know some investors would prefer we didn't. But just, yeah, for the reasons we've mentioned, gone more down the route of, you know, how do we make this token as easily transactable as possible rather than how do we make it as profitable as possible.
And I personally, as an investor, like hearing that because I've only watched a dozen exponential rebase protocols crash and burn in the last 4 months who basically built a token reward factory. Like, all it does is give you token rewards.
Yeah, and that's great if you want to hold a token from sort of listing for the first couple of weeks. It's not an issue at all. And I'm sure the founders make plenty of cash from those deals. But we're very serious as a project. You know, we're sort of not hearing all the noise. We're not worried too much about the overall market. We've got a very complicated product to build, and that's where our focus is. Because we know that once it's totally complete and out there on the market, it fills a gap that hasn't been addressed yet. And the feedback every step of the way has just been so good. And because we're focused more on the product itself rather than the short-term performance of the token, we're making our decisions slightly differently. I think on the price of the token as well, maybe to segue into another question, I think I saw in the chat there, there was the question about the token price, which is a fantastic question. With the token price, the factors behind that are really the marketing piece that was missing until recently, as one of the main components. You know, we listed this project, we had unbelievable technical competence in the team, but we didn't really have a marketeer amongst us, and that turned out to be a handicap or a bit of a weight in our pockets. Because, you know, even though we're doing all these cool things and making these cool new products, people weren't finding out about it. And, yeah, you know, we've now solved that. But that was definitely an issue. And the other issue was the vesting releases from pre-sale and IDO purchases. We didn't really fully understand how this would impact the project when we, you know, did our pre-sale and IDO. What we did is we raised and we agreed to give all the investors their tokens, the 25% tranches every month for the first 4 months, which I think is relatively standard in crypto. But what we found is that every time the price would get momentum, we'd smack it down because there was a new tranche of tokens released to the market. And, you know, long term, we've kind of realized that probably wasn't the best way to do it. We should have probably had all the tokens go out right away. But anyway, we live and learn. That process is completely finished now. So on the 4th of February, we had our last vesting release go out, and that was the biggest, you know, moment of relief for us, because, you know, that anchor that had been on the price in the form of new tokens entering the market, we were kind of liberated from it. And so for us, we're super excited now because we've got the marketing thing sorted. We've got a genius CMO who's doing all these cool, weird, and wonderful things, dramatically transforming the amount of traffic we're getting and people who are finding out about Infomatix, as well as the vesting being totally exhausted and no new tokens entering the market. Now our staking pool has closed. So it's essentially basically at a point now where you can expect no new tokens to enter the market. And now that we've kind of built that strong foundation, we've got all of our product releases coming out. So we have the Metaverse coming out today. You'll be able to enter the Metaverse and actually look and feel and smell and taste and touch this Friday. that we have more and more comprehensive iterations of Infomatix being deployed sort of every couple of weeks from now. And so we feel like we're in the strongest position we've ever been in, because the impediments have been dealt with and the products are now sophisticated enough that we can give them to everybody and to really try and poke holes in and tell us how we can improve before we release the final iterations couple of months from now.
Okay. Next question's a combo question from both Wolf and Sunset, who ask if you have any security measures in place to prevent whale purchasers from dumping your token.
No, we don't have anything in place to prevent whales from dumping the token. Well, we had quite a few decisions to make, and this was one of them. You know, do we have sales tax? Do we have revenue sharing? Do we have limitations? And what we eventually ended up with is basically the key philosophy of the token has to be as easily transactable as possible. And everything we did kind of worked backwards from there. The great thing is, because of the way we did our pre-sale and our IDO, we didn't really have a seed round. We were self-funding through that phase. There isn't really any major whales that could do super significant damage to the project, except maybe myself and my business partner. And neither of us have sold any tokens. Neither of us are planning on selling any tokens, and they're all locked up in investing contracts anyway. So, look, if there's sell pressure, there's going to be sell pressure. If there's buy pressure, there's going to be buy pressure, and the market will value our project, especially now that there's more and more for the market to see, rather than sort of a vision of what we're going to have. We actually have products for people to look and play around with now. But yeah, I think we tried to make things as fair and as smooth as possible without putting, impediments on anybody. So yeah, maybe not the answer that the user was looking for, but that's how it's all been set up.
No problem, and the answer is the answer. Wolf MVP also asks, in your Medium article, you've mentioned info being overlooked. We've talked a bit about marketing, but is there any steps you're taking that you haven't mentioned thus far to ensure that info is going to get the attention and coverage that you think it deserves?
Oh, absolutely. So, we've gone from a business that had basically zero marketing going on, except maybe, our community and our Twitter, but effectively zero marketing to, in the last 6-7 weeks, we've now got LinkedIn campaigns, Facebook campaigns, Instagram campaigns, Twitter, Pinterest, Reddit, Quora campaigns going on. We've got CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, BSC Scan, CoinZilla campaigns going on. We've got a totally multifaceted marketing campaign that's just working tremendously. Like our traffic has gone up 3,000% in the last 6 weeks. And if anyone goes to our website, once you've been to our website, we'll target you and you'll see our ads everywhere. And what's happened is we've gone from basically no new awareness to now a massive amount of new awareness. And what we find is typically takes people sort of 7 points of exposure to sort of learn to trust a brand. And the way our funnel's working, we're getting a lot of people through that process now. So a huge number of people have been sort of put into the funnel, and some of them are now starting to come out again. So it takes a little while to give people enough points of exposure for them to make sort of an investment decision. But we're now getting the first cohorts of people sort of all the way through that. So as we progress, we'll get better and better and better at this. And we're already doing extremely well, and you'll see a massive, massive difference. So, if you see an article of ours on Quora, you will then see an ad on Facebook. And if you hear about us through Instagram, we'll follow you on your banner ads when you're looking through eBay. And if you've ever been to our website, you'll see us on all your devices everywhere you go, sort of no matter what platform you're on.
Nice.
And so that, yeah. And so just to go back to our CMO Orkan, we have, I guess, worked with marketing people before, but outside of crypto, it's a totally different space.
It really is.
Having Orkan has totally transformed our business. I can't understate that enough. He's got this perspective that we didn't have within the team, and this ability to bring in traffic that is just incredible. And so that process has been starting. The first few weeks, obviously, you run with a lower budget to test, but now we're getting very, very good at sort of bringing traffic in for as low a cost as possible. And that will play out over time and get better and better and better as we go.
Okay. Allison M2000 is asking questions about staking and liquidity pool rewards, which of course themselves beg the question first, does Info have liquidity pool staking and or staking rewards?
We do. So we have a staking pool on Tostas that it will be live for another 6 weeks. That staking pool was originally meant to have an 80% APY, but because it's a decentralized staking platform, we can't change it after we deploy it. And that staking platform was way more popular than we thought. So the more tokens that get entered into the pool, the lower the APY. So that APY is well below 20% now. We also have liquidity farming on ApeSwap. That APY is much higher. That APY, I believe, hovers around between 60 and 100%. I'm not sure what it is at today. So they're the two staking options at the moment. We will have a staking platform on our website as well that we host in-house, but that's not the major priority for us at the moment, and that's not on the roadmap for the next, short term, next quarter at least. Gotcha. You won't see that on our website.
Okay. Raucous Porpoise asks, what kinds of decisions will holders help to make as part of Infomatix? Is it going to work like a DAO? Will it be similar to Algo or something else, perhaps?
Yeah, great question. So the real value for info holders, and I think that the most exciting thing that sort of lays up ahead, is we obviously have a lot of building and testing to do with the Infomatix platform. However, once that building and testing reaches a certain point, a critical mass, so to speak, and the most difficult, heavy lifting part of the project is behind us, we'll transition the entire project to a DAO, and it will become completely community driven. And so what we need to do, what our job is to set up the right systems and processes so that the project has a strong foundation and a clear set of rules that everyone can follow. And the reason we haven't made it a DAO yet is because we need to go through quite a few iterations to find out the best structure and final form for that. But once that's been hammered out and proven, the platform will transition to a DAO, and all major changes will then be voted on. And then that's where the actual use of the info token and the info tokens that are earned by the platform will then fall into the hands of the community to make those decisions on.
Okay. USMB2 asks, good to know.
I love these handle names.
Oh yeah, everyone's handles are the best. I love this community's handles. USMB2 asks, good to know that the main focus of the project is to decentralize information and data. But how will you comply with the terms and conditions of the exchanges to get info listed and get it to the top?
Is this getting listed on centralized exchanges? Is that the question?
I believe he's essentially asking if the information is decentralized, you might go against some centralized exchanges' terms and conditions. There's a reason that certain coins and projects still aren't listed on Coinbase, for example, or Binance, even though Binance is often famously the shitcoin paradise.
Yeah, well, we haven't had any issues with centralized exchanges at all. We haven't spoken to Binance yet, but we have spoken to a lot of them. We're currently listed on AAX, and there was no issues there. We've spoken to basically all of the tier 2 exchanges, and it's simply a matter of money as to whether we list with them or not. There hasn't been any concerns about the project itself. It's very, transactional in the fact that, hey, here's our fee. If you want to list on the exchange, pay the fee. We'll list you. Happy days. With Binance may be different, but I don't think we'd be in any violation there. I mean, we'll find out once we speak to them. But the project itself has a use case that's kind of divorced from the actual token itself at some level, as far as the exchanges would be concerned. So I can't imagine there being any issues there. There certainly hasn't been with the central exchanges we've spoken to so far.
Okay. The user's second question: the South Asian crypto market is a big market in terms of growth and market capitalization because it contains developing nations. How is Infomatix going to focus or target this particular region and get some hype going there?
So we have in our Discord and Telegram, we have chat specifically for each language group. We find some are more popular than others. Definitely, countries like Thailand, Malaysia, India, China have massive crypto communities. At the moment, the only way we've targeted those guys and tried to make info attractive to those communities is through the community channels, Discord and Telegram. However, with our ads, we're just starting our international approach. So we've started, obviously, given recent events, probably wasn't the right decision. We started testing the Russian market with low budgets. We'll be testing local markets sort of one at a time, spending a couple of weeks on each of them. And we'll pick, I would say, 2, maybe 3 key areas. So it may be Brazil, Thailand, and India that we focus on, or maybe another 3, depending on how the pilot program goes. And we'll have those as our focus. The issue that we have to solve is there's too many geos to target everybody. And then there's too many groups to really market to. So we're spending the next few weeks focusing on which of those areas are going to be most beneficial for us, and then we'll sort of pick those key areas. South Asia is definitely one that we've got on the list. Indonesia's got a huge crypto community. So do a lot of countries in that area. And yeah, we'll start marketing to them shortly. But which specific locations are, we haven't come to that decision yet.
Okay. Fairtaste, your question is very strange. I'm going to ask it because I'm not sure what the context for it is. Does Infomatix have anything to do with the adult pornographic entertainment industry?
No.
Okay, then this question lacks proper context because the user wanted to know, in quote, Infomatix is the first decentralized adult community. However, many countries will block pornographic content. Do you have a marketing strategy for countries that block pornographic content? I don't think they need one if they're not getting involved in the porn industry.
Yeah, I don't know. But maybe we went down the wrong track. Maybe we should have made a different decision right at the beginning and gone that way. But
yeah, it's a whole other ball game if we're trying to talk about valuing the assets of porn stars. Everyone, just putting that out there. All right, moving on. EB asks, if I want to request data for certain properties or antiques, will I be getting an evaluation certificate or a certificate of authenticity?
Oh, awesome question. So as I mentioned, we've got a conversation coming up with Chainlink, and we're very conscious of the how do I sort of frame it? We're very conscious of the gap that's open there for us, and so by us moving out data on chain or a component of that data on chain, it does give us the ability to provide things like certificates of authenticity. So one thing we've been playing with in our projections, and it certainly hasn't been fixed in stone yet, is we currently basically just ask you, hey, what's the asset that you want valued, and we go and value it for you. What we're planning on doing is having a more comprehensive option, so you can just do the quick and easy, dirty, give me a valuation, that's all I want. Or you can request a valuation that then comes with some sort of verification. So that example, let's use a piece of real estate. You might say, I own this home. We're going to need a couple of images of the home and maybe a certificate of sale with your name on it. In that scenario, we'd be able to provide a valuation certificate as an NFT with the credentials of the person who valued it. So we could create this really cool looking template that says asset X was valued by, expert Y on the Infomatix portal on this date. And that would be kind of a more substantial record of valuation. Very, very valuable for real estate specifically. So we are conscious of the use case, but we haven't figured out the best way to solve it yet. So in its current form, Infomatix doesn't give you anything like that. In its final form, it certainly will, but the actual look and feel of that haven't been determined yet. But we already have the user's wallet address. We are obviously a Web3 project, so it makes a lot of sense to bake in that NFT infrastructure. And using BSC makes that much easier for us because we can transfer those NFTs for a couple of cents. But as far as a complete vision on how that will look, it's still coming together for us. It hasn't really taken shape yet. That'll probably be maybe one or two iterations from where we are now to when we have a feature like that. But very, very much on our mind.
Okay. Fishtivity asks, are you hiring evaluators?
Yes, we certainly are. If you pop to our website and you click request early access, we'll take your details and then we'll reach out to you with the next steps on providing your details. So there's a couple of options. One that's right for most people is that kind of online research tier where you don't need a high level of expert knowledge. But if you do have expertise in a specific area, that's even better. I mean, we're looking for as many experts as we can. Some areas we're able to find them quite easily. Some areas is more difficult. So especially if you are a real estate agent, anyone on the call, we can certainly use your help. And there's plenty of, there's plenty of cash to be made if you are able to help us with those valuations.
Second question from Fishtivity. Would you be a middleman would you, presumably Infomatix, be a middleman for a trade between two users that have used your service for an evaluation?
See, this is the other piece that we're working on now, the marketplace. So with our marketplace, we are probably more leaning towards becoming an aggregator rather than hosting our own marketplace. So bringing together things like Sotheby's, StockX, PokemonCard.com, eBay. Yeah, eBay is going to be the big one that covers everything else. So with some of the asset classes, there are very niche marketplaces that are specifically for those asset classes. So Chrono24 for watches, StockX for sneakers. But if you have an antique telescope, for example, or an armillary sphere, or some artwork, it's going to be eBay pretty much every time.
Okay. Dear Mesta asks, Do you make use of any data oracles? And if you do, which ones, and how do you use them?
We're not really. So because our data is referencing real world items or existing asset data, now or in the past, where sort of the data oracles are a slightly different use case. What we're doing, if we were forward looking and trying to make evaluations on what something will be worth in the future, the oracles would be invaluable for us. But because we're concerned with historical performance and present value, the oracles don't really fit into that sort of more narrow universe.
Okay. Lou123 asks, recently you've done a program named Infothon. Is this just a program to make users get more ideas about what Infomatix does, or do you have any future plans regarding Infothon?
Well, no. So a hackathon, we get all the hackers together. We go through a bit of a competition, and the greatest hacker wins. With the Infothon, we had the light version of our portal ready, and to celebrate, we wanted to collect a bit of a blood rush of data, rather than just having the light version of the Infomatix portal live on the website and letting people use it if they wanted. We had the Infothon around as a bit of a marketing campaign to drive use and to drive awareness, and it was super successful. What we learned from the Infothon was really cool. What we found is that the assets that we thought people were invested in were kind of right. There was a lot of interest in those asset classes, but the real surprise for us was that there was a much broader uptake of the Infomatix portal from assets that we just had not even considered before. People were putting in their speaker system into the platform. They were putting in their laptop. They were visualizing their stocks and cryptos and all of their sort of personal assets. And what the users considered personal assets was much broader than what we had previously considered personal assets, which is a great learning for us. We didn't really expect it, but now what we're doing is we're building more flexibility into the product to handle a broader range of assets and a sort of a wider scope. And what you'll see now is that the initial version of the product has been released. The Infothon was run to celebrate that and to drive use. And now what you'll see is over the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks, massive improvements in product and features and new releases every 2 weeks. And by the end of it, we'll have the full comprehensive live version of the Infomatix portal available for everyone to use and participate in and contribute to. So the Infothon for us was a campaign to sort of celebrate that initial milestone.
Okay. Wang asks, tell us where you got the startup capital for Infomatix. Once you received investments as a promising startup, at least, or are you solely planning to raise money for the investment in Infomatix with the sale of the Info token?
Oh, no. So the development, the roadmap that we have for Infomatix is fully funded. So what happened was the first iterations we funded ourselves, which was quite fine. Then we went through the pre-sale and the IDO for Infomatix. So we raised $750,000 from both of those rounds. That is entirely being used for the development of the Infomatix portal. So as I said before, we're not here as a kind of one cycle wonder. We're really here to build a product that has a real world use case, regardless of market conditions. So we're quite insulated from the broader market in the fact that development is funded out quite a ways into the future. So yeah, does that answer the question?
I think so. The user's second question would be, if I'm a developer and I'm interested in contributing to the project in addition to earning some income, do you guys have anything like bug bounties to check for vulnerabilities in Infomatix's systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Infomatix now live out in the wild, and we have the metaverse being released today. And you'll be able to visit it from Friday. We're going to start a much more significant bug bounty. We've had an informal one going for a little while, but we'll have more details on that on all of our socials when it comes live, but that will be very shortly. But as well, if you're a developer, we're always hiring developers, so feel free to drop a line in our Telegram. We'll have someone have a chat to you. We're always looking for good devs.
Awesome. My man Sergeant 13 Bravo, the chief of all guns, asks, how do you compete with Google, eBay, Realtor, KBB, NADA, and other types of research that are available on ballpark pricing? The internet is already a wealth of resources for pretty accurate ballpark numbers.
Certainly is, but that data has to be, filtered through and searched for. What Infomatix does, it puts it all in one place and allows you to use it for what you were originally intending to use it for. You don't want to. The issue is, and I think really the thrust behind Infomatix was, when I was trying to track my portfolio in 2019, when I was in sort of 5 different asset classes, I had to update spreadsheets all the time, and I had to go and have a look. What is this worth? And then enter it into the spreadsheet. And then I'd have to come back next week and I'd have to look what it's worth and I have to enter it in the spreadsheet. And it was a mess. And the spreadsheet doesn't tell you anything intuitively. You have to spend some time looking at it to really draw any insights out of it. So what Infomatix does, it simplifies that, makes it straightforward and as easy as possible for the user. And that's now. Once we have the critical mass of data that we need for financial and non-financial data, we won't be sort of simplifying a process the users could do any other way. We'll have something truly unique. And so to go back to people who are training models and need access to these massive amounts of data, there's nothing comparable to this sort of available on the market now. I mean, you can go and pull free data sets on sort of a random obscure topic or COVID data, for example, no problem. But meaningful data that has a progression over time, like pricing data does, very difficult to get access to in the form that you would need it, which is sort of raw, almost like an infinite CSV file. So that's what the next iteration will bring. The current iteration simplifies the process. So you can, of course, go and check the price of something on eBay. The value of Infomatix over that solution, though, is the more obscure you get, the more difficult it is to value. So real estate, the issue is it's too general. Rare books, the issue is there's not enough volume, so it's very difficult to find your specific value. And the more obscure you get, the more difficult it is to find that value online. And so Infomatix really solves that by bringing everything under one roof.
Okay. Broken Blue Goldfish Sammy asks, how are freelancers going to benefit from the platform? Would they be able to sell their services?
Oh, absolutely. So if you're a freelancer and you're a bit of a research whiz, or especially if you have subject matter expertise in one of these categories that we focus on, you'll be able to come on, register your interest to be an appraiser with Infomatix, and we'll start sending you batches of tasks that you can choose to do or not do. But it will be quite financially rewarding for those people. So, if you're a subject matter expert in Pokemon cards, for example, when you come home, there'll be a list or a queue of valuations waiting to go through, and you'll just be able to pick and choose as you go. So what we kind of envision Infomatix as for these subject matter experts is almost like a part-time gig that they can do on the side. So you might spend your whole day, working at, Pokemon, coming up with new cards, and when you go home, you can just sort of on the bus home, add a few valuations. Same to real estate agents. Real estate agents typically know the values of all the houses on their street, but because no one's selling their homes, they can't do anything with that knowledge. Informatics provides that outlet for them to jump on, provide these valuations, and get paid for the knowledge they already have in their minds. So definitely, if you're thinking about contributing to the platform, jump on the website, register your interest, and we'll make contact with you from there on how to take the next steps.
Cool. Sammy's second question. If experts would be able to monetize their expertise, are they paid in native fiat currency? I believe they would be paid in info, wouldn't they?
They would be paid in info, absolutely.
Okay.
So you'll be able to connect your wallet, and you'll be paid sort of live in real time as you complete tasks.
All right. Richard
So it's almost
oh, sorry, go for it.
Just on that, it's almost like an adult version of like a play to earn game. So instead of playing a game, you're playing the sort of research game, but it almost is a play to earn mechanism.
Okay. Richard Skidoo asks, what are the biggest risks, presumably in your opinion, associated with Infomatix at this time?
Great question. I mean, ultimately, like if we take the existential view, the biggest risk is some sort of blackout event or cyber attack. But that wouldn't necessarily be the biggest threat to informatics. That'd be the biggest threat to basically everything.
Yeah.
From informatics, we face we face the same threats everyone faces. There's always people trying to pull off a hack or a breach or we're constantly trying to defend against these things. There is the risk of competition, but that's not something I'm particularly worried about, because what we've seen since we started this is that there's hyper focus on those digital asset classes like stocks, cryptos, and bonds, and almost nobody's really watching these alternate asset classes. Even if someone does decide they want to take us on in this area, it's very difficult to compete with us. At least to come up with something in the short term that's comparable. So yeah, there's always risks, and we're sort of doing our best to mitigate them. But other than sort of the big existential risks, I think we've got a good moat around the business. We've got enough technical competence to know that if someone wants to compete with us, at least it's going to be very hard for them. So yeah, I guess the ever-present threat of a cyber attack and then the existential threat of some blackout are the two big ones.
Okay. Clutch asks, is your platform suitable for crypto beginners, or was it designed to only appeal to professionals?
Well, no. So this is the perfect thing. So back to the Bloomberg terminal. The Bloomberg terminal is designed for professionals. It's really designed for experts that spend their whole day on that product. What we want to do is offer a similar service to retail investors that don't need to be technically competent, doesn't need to be difficult, and it's very, very straightforward. So user experience is something we've taken into account at every step of the way to make sure that things are as easy as possible.
Okay. Next question. Yes. Still from Clutch. Which country, or I would add to that, continent, is going to be the main focus of the project, if you have one?
Yeah, no, well, it's a very good question. So with the product itself, some of the asset classes are agnostic to jurisdiction, right? Like Pokemon cards, doesn't matter whether that you're in, Seattle or Sydney. A Pokemon card, in theory, would have the same value, and all we've got to do is just convert that into the local user's currency. With specific geographic stuff, we're quite confident that real estate will be one of the main drivers of sort of volume on this platform. So we're going to focus specifically on the United States, Australia, and England for those first couple of months while we're building out our real estate piece. Just because that is where there is the most money and interest in real estate investment. So for example, we can collect real estate for every country, real estate data for every country, but because we can't do every country all at once, we're focusing on these countries where they've got the wealthiest and most engaged real estate investors to start with, and then we'll proliferate from there. So ultimately, we want this to be a global product, but we will triage, I guess, the most important key areas up front, and then build out the bulk and scope sort of on the back end, is really our strategy. So every geography will be looked after, but we'll focus on those key markets to start with.
Okay. Oh, wait, hold on, I'm skipping somebody. Yeah, okay. Roddy asks, what are exactly the Web3 technologies that you intend to use? Will there be a suitable helper in the site or platform to make everything accessible to everyone?
Well, this is something we're super excited about. So the Web3 stuff, I think the people on this call will be quite comfortable with. I mean, people in this audience will understand that. The helper question, though, is super cool. So our co-founder, my business partner's name is Tamer Garsberg. He's the CEO of a company called Ybot.ai, and they build enterprise agents, basically chatbots that you can speak to that have natural language, that help solve a user's problem. And so they've been spending years doing that, and they work with companies like Orange and VMware and Microsoft, and they help them with those large scale service issues. What that means for us is, though, that we have basically an amazing AI assistant that we can build into this, that we've worked on and practiced with and works perfectly well. So I don't know if you've seen the Infomatix robot on our website or in any of our animations, but what will happen is when you use the product or when you enter the metaverse, there will be a character there that you can speak with, that will execute all of your commands. So for example, if you're adding assets to your portfolio, you can walk and talk to the robot and say, hey, I just bought 0.5 Bitcoin today, and I sold 1,000 Doge, and the assistant will update your portfolio for you. You don't have to do anything. So part of the reason we did that is because when you're in the metaverse, we don't want you to be doing too much typing. It should all be sort of verbal commands. And then when you're doing work through Infomatix, as a contributor, you'll also have access to the same assistant. So that part will be super cool, because a lot of people don't really have much grasp of AI because it's such a new technology. And we're super lucky that we have Tamer with us, because he's been doing this for years and years. And they've really worked out quite an impressive model over that time that we'll be able to quite luckily just copy and paste, so to speak, across to the Infomatix use case.
Very cool. Okay. Next we have M. Mahar, who asks, as Infomatix is striving to connect investors and experts to provide right to information, how will you check the authenticity of the experts, that they are bona fide? We did touch on this a little bit earlier, but I felt it was worth asking again.
We certainly touched on it. So what we do is, when the experts come through to us, we collect their credentials, their work history, and a few other data points that give us a good understanding of who the expert is and what their qualifications are to be able to contribute information in that space. And it's a relatively rigorous process, but it's not ultra demanding. The second iteration, though, to become a verifier, which is the final step before information gets written into our database, that's quite arduous. So you need to prove track record, references, all of these types of things before you're able to get that verifier status. And so, as I mentioned before, there's always a small margin of error for human error once you have real people involved. But the way we vet our candidates makes sure that as far as possible, we've just got quality contributors on the platform.
Okay. And Mahar's second question is also very interesting. Currently, the world is hunting after digital assets like lands, avatars, in-game assets, etc. I'm presuming the user's referring to NFTs. Does Infomatix provide information about those prices too, apart from real-world assets?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of play-to-earn games that have very big, very large communities and very substantial costs to some of the in-game assets. We're working with them to be able to pull all of their assets so that you can visualize the ship you own in a particular play-to-earn game with your portfolio. NFTs are very straightforward for us. There's just a simple plugin, so when you use any of the products, if you enter your wallet address, we'll be able to pull all of your NFT data as well. Infomatix will hold copies of key NFT data points that will be useful for investors, but that's really a no-brainer for us. We'll certainly be able to bake it into the product, but that's not a difficult feature like it is getting some of the real-world data.
Okay. Hashan asks first a question about staking. We've already talked about that, but the second question is very interesting. How would you manage your platform in the event of an unexpected black swan event, like a hack or something similar in the future? How many procedures are in place to prevent this from occurring? And what would be the team's potential response and course of movement?
Well, it depends very much on the black swan event. I mean, if we have another 9/11 type event, it's not really a catastrophic for the platform itself. There may be some very strange events in the world, but the actual data collection and data aggregation, data redistribution part of our business will be totally fine. Black swan events that we have been thinking about is a lot more geared towards sort of a war and locking of certain jurisdictions. So, for example, we haven't recently, but we did used to have some developers in Russia, which would now be difficult because you can't really pay them. They could get cut off from our internet and be uncontactable, things like that. So that's definitely been brought front of mind for us since everything started to happen in the Ukraine. So the way we're dealing with that is making sure that we have the team spread out, no single point of failure, so that no matter what happens with individual team members, the team itself can continue operating. If on a higher order, black swan event, you get something like a blackout as the kind of worst case that you can kind of imagine for a project like this. We have everything backed up offline, so we could reboot the entire system in a day or two if that happens. But there's only so much preparation you can do for an event like that. All other events, I think, we're quite well hedged against.
Okay. Dark Bear asks, what is the use of the gold pass, and how do I get one?
Oh, okay. So the gold pass it's too late to get one now. What will happen is the metaverse is going to be open to everybody on Friday. But if you're a gold and a silver pass holder, you're able to get in now ahead of everybody else. So when you go to enter the metaverse, it'll check your wallet. If you have one of the gold or silver passes at this stage, it will let you in or not. And so you get a bit of a head start. If you don't have a gold or silver pass, no problem. We'll let everybody in from Friday. And the gold and silver passes, there may be more opportunities to win those again in the future. And what they are is early access to new features that haven't been fully released to the product yet. So it's almost like a ticket to the VIP table when we're testing things out.
Okay. We're kind of getting near the end. There's not that many questions left that we haven't covered. CryptoMain9 asks, do you guys feel satisfied seeing your progress and achievements up to now, and when you look back to the time when you started the project?
It's been absolutely incredible. I think the progress the team has made is really unbelievable. I think back to when we first started. I was speaking to Mayor, who's now my business partner. I had all these spreadsheets from the research that I was trying to do, and I was trying to make sense of, and we were trying to figure out a way to simplify it and bring it all into one place and fill the gaps, because there was a lot of things I wanted to know that I couldn't find out, and that frustration kind of led to all of this: Gnosis, Infomatix, the crypto project, this call we're having now, and it's been phenomenal.
Awesome.
If we look at the strength of the project and the actual what we've done and what we've built, we've just gone on a trajectory, straight line up and to the left, like you'd want to see on a chart. The fact the price hasn't followed us yet is because of a couple of perhaps mistakes we made early on with our vesting schedule and with our marketing kerfuffles. And now that those have been dealt with, I think you'll see that progress that we've made that we can very easily measure with regards to the product itself, reflected in that price action, which will be a great relief for all the investors that have been here right from the beginning.
Cool. CryptoMain's second question, also in reference to NFTs, will there be any future advantages for Infomatix NFTs relative to any games or the metaverse? For example, staking of the NFTs.
So the NFTs act as a bit of a golden ticket to get into small group events or initial releases. We don't have any particular plans to make those NFTs stakeable. I mean, it's always possible. The big thing we're looking at with NFTs is more around verification of those physical assets. But to that particular question, we're not really headed down that track at the moment.
Okay. And final question of the show. I'm going to give it to Roddy, who asks, this is just for my personal curiosity, but will you somehow find a way to combine your project with Wikipedia, making a kind of metaverse encyclopedia?
It's a good question. I think we're very, very focused on the data piece. Information, like the type of information that you get on Wikipedia, is almost a different beast. I think the way I kind of think about it is, if it's not on Wikipedia, you can find it. You can find it somewhere else. Or it can be re-articulated in a different place, and there's a lot more flexibility and nuance. With data, it's very much a yes, no, correct, incorrect proposition. And for that reason, if there's something missing, it's much more problematic. Like, for example, if you read an article on Wikipedia and there's missing context, you can kind of build the context from the rest of the article. If there's a data set and there's a missing sequence, there's no way for you to know that there's anything missing. And what really, really frustrated me is when I realized the data that was available, the tools that were available to institutional investors that were not available to retail investors. It just blew me away. And if you're a retail investor and you've never seen any of those tools that institutional investors have access to, you don't realize what you're missing. And so for that reason, until we've solved the data piece, we're not really concerned with anything else.
Awesome. All right. With that, we get to our final and favorite portion of the show, everyone's favorite, the part where we give away money.
Amazing.
All right, we have a lot of killer questions today. Not all the users were able to stick around, judging by the stage audience, but that's okay. They still get rewards for being here and asking regardless, because we appreciate it. Everyone's obviously very busy, and there's a lot going on in the world right now.
Yes.
Okay, there are a handful of disqualified users who I will post to you. Okay. With those noted, everyone else in the Infomatix AMA pinned messages section is eligible for best question selection.
Okay.
We have some good questions here. I've got some personal suggestions I could give you too. But I usually will offer 3 of these winners to the visiting team. So if there were some particular questions that you liked, Mr. Fowler.
Okay. Yeah, so we picked them out and they get the... Okay, I love this.
Yeah. This is everyone's favorite part.
I'm trying to scroll back in the chat here.
You don't have to scroll back. Are you on a phone or a PC?
Both.
If you're on a phone, you'll want to slide from the right-hand side to the left, and it will reveal you a push pin button at the top. If you're on PC, it'll just be at the top of the chat. You click that little push pin, and then you can scroll through the questions.
Okay, give me 1 second.
The graphic icon on the user interface looks exactly like a little classic push pin you would put in a school message board for posting things on a message board. Fish just supplied you a graphic there.
Okay, I'm trying to find out the question that we had on NFTs. I think was a great one.
We've had quite a few.
Yes, the first one I was trying to look for. Let me see if I can find the right one. Bear with me just a moment. Yeah, I think I definitely don't want to hold everyone up scrolling looking for the right question. So. Maybe as the host, we'll have to. I think
you want
to the bottom of pins, Nexus. If he scrolls to the bottom of pins, you'll see the first questions.
Yes, the very first questions are going to be at the bottom of the list.
Okay. Just conscious of everyone's time, though. I think maybe it's going to be, better to leave the selection of the winning questions up to you there.
Okay.
Nexus.
No problem. I'd be happy to take over for that for you, especially if you gotta go.
You're just conscious of being awkwardly scrolling on everybody.
That's okay. No worries. No problem. All right. In that case, I'll go ahead and count us out. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been yet another AMA with the Wolves of Wall Street. My name is Nexus. I've been your host for this show. As always, I owe all my thanks to this entire community and the team of people, Sarge, Sai, Hustle, Fish, Cyber Unicorn, Ray, the entire mod team, Praisen for the art, Arthex for doing a great job. It really, really makes a huge difference. As always, all of the information that you heard was not to be construed as financial advice and represented only the opinions of the speakers, myself, Mr. Fowler, and do not represent the opinions of the entirety of the Wolves of Wall Street as a community or the entirety of the team at Infomatix. And with that said, thank you all very much for joining us. We will be proceeding shortly to the post show where we will choose our winners.
Thank you so much for that. That was a fantastic game. I hope to be back here again, and thanks everyone for tuning in and staying up to date with what's going on with the project. We hope to see you in some of the Infomatix chat later on to see what we've got coming up next. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you so much, Nexus, for what a wonderful job, mate.
I really appreciate it.
You were born for this, mate.
Apparently, I was, and please. You got more projects who want to come talk, feel free to hit us up. We got plenty of journalism yet to do.
Okay, mate, I certainly will. I'll Depot let me know about you guys. I'll let everyone I know about you guys. Amazing work. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for today.
It was a pleasure, sir. Cheers.
Cheers.